If you have 1 out of 5 HR people at large companies experiencing brain fry, I got to think that number's only going up, not down. Welcome to the Wellable Weekly Podcast, where we talk about key topics and trends at the intersection of well-being, technology, and HR. I'm Nick, and I'm with my colleague Geoff here. Geoff, happy Masters Friday.
Yes, my favorite time of the year.
Yeah, I'm just rocking a little bit. I'm not sure if you can see it, a little bit Masters gear.
There you go.
They say that the tournament is a tradition unlike any other. So I feel like you and I should harness some of that spirit in our podcast today.
Well, I mean, it's a podcast unlike any other, so very fitting.
Indeed. All right. So no surprise, more AI articles. But I found this one to be really compelling because, yes, it's an article, but it's really about a study that I found super intriguing. It's one of those articles you have to read twice just to digest it. But it's from a BCG study, a Boston Consulting Group study. Full disclosure, BCG is a customer of ours. But they had a study of 1,500-ish US-based workers at large companies, spanning all people across the spectrum, from managers to individual contributors. I think one of the things to note is that it was focused on large companies because the focus of the study was AI use in the agentic sense. Like, am I setting up an agent to go do tasks for me? Where I think the majority of people, including myself, it is mostly in the realm of having a chatbot help me complete tasks as opposed to an agent completing tasks on my behalf. So I think it's an important distinction because some of the results need to be taken with that context. But effectively, they asked all these questions to these people around the quantity of their AI use, their work experiences with AI, and their cognition and emotions during these experiences, just to best understand kind of the impact of AI. And they end up finding a ton of insightful findings. And they coined a term called AI brain fry, which is really the focus of the article and really the focus of what we will be talking about. And in short, just to lay the landscape a little bit, big companies are increasingly incentivizing employees to build and oversee complex teams of agents. They're doing so in terms of incentivizing people by measuring outcomes and measuring use of AI. They're rewarding people based on their token consumption. A good example of this, I think you and I talked about this, Geoff, couple weeks ago, where Meta, part of their bonus structure, so the variable compensation structure that Meta has put in, is based on AI usage, right? So they are comping and measuring engineers, for example, about the number of lines of code they are writing through AI, right? So if you're just put yourself in the shoes, you're an engineer at Meta, part of your compensation is based on it. You're going to try to optimize for AI usage and not necessarily outcomes or impact from that. And as a result, you're probably launching a bunch of agents, you're using a bunch of tokens, and these employees at these companies are finding themselves like really pushed to the limit, and specifically the cognitive limit. Like they're pushed to a limit of being able to manage all these things happening at the same time. And, it goes without saying, it carries a significant cost to the employer, right? In the form of employee errors. They're just overloaded with what to review. They have decision fatigue because there's so many decisions to make because these agents are constantly, presenting forks in the road, right? There's so much pressure just to get the job done that there's inclination to quit, right? So you lose these really talented employees. And so the financial costs are pretty impactful when you think about this concept of AI brain fry.
Right, and the potential costs that are disproportionately impacting certain parts of organizations. And I think as a concept, it was refreshing to see an article like this that was really focused on the human impact of AI. Obviously, we've seen other studies and projections come out about the potential for how it could advance industries and different functions. I think that chart from Anthropic made the rounds, kind of like that spider chart that showed the potential impact across different industries and functions and where we are today, and substantial gaps, right? So I think everybody appreciates the potential there, but having a study like this that examines within different parts of business who today at an individual level are really feeling the negative impacts of trying to increase efficiency and output with new tools that are still being developed and understood, and seeing some really familiar faces here. Marketing, obviously, the world that I certainly operate in, and then HR and people operations right behind them, at 20%, or just shy of 20% of employees reporting brain-fi. Clearly, that's impacting a part of the world that we know very well, and I think it's a combination of these functional groups are ripe for maybe some efficiency gains and opportunities to again do more with less. I think what we hear consistently from folks in HR is it's always feeling like they operate pretty lean to begin with, and those types of again functional teams might have aspirations for achieving more with tools that can again allow them to do that with a pretty low footprint. So very interesting to see how some of these different departments are impacted.
Exactly. And the study didn't really weigh in on like the direction it's headed, but if you have 1 out of 5 HR people at large companies experiencing brain fry, I got to think that number's only going up, not down, because token usage is going up and things like that. And so for that 1 in 5 and potentially even 1 in 4 and 1 in 3, as this creeps into more people's lives, right? I think what you're going to see is, like, according to the study, and this is based on the survey, is that those individuals who kind of endorsed that they were experiencing brain fry, 33% were more likely, 33% more likely to experience decision fatigue, right? For the same group of people, those who are experiencing brain fry, they're more likely to make mistakes, right? And so according to the study, they define mistakes as minor mistakes, or they call them errors or major errors. And they say they're scoring 11% and 13%, respectively, as it relates to minor and major error frequencies. And so real impacts. And what's a big driver or kind of a leading indicator of brain fry was the number of agents you're running. I guess that's not surprising, but it's always good to have that confirmation. And so they went through and they broke out the study. So if as employees go from using 1 AI tool to using 2 simultaneously, they experience an increase in productivity. Not surprising, right? As they go from 2 to 3, the productivity increases, but at a lower rate. And then as you go from 3 to 4, which blows my mind, right? That they're having 4 different agents, but for those individuals who are making to above 3, their actual productivity scores dipped. And this has nothing to deal with even like the brain fry concept. It's just broadly productivity. So it doesn't even get to how they're feeling cognitively, right? Or even emotionally in this situation. And I guess it's not surprising, and I say this as someone who multitasks. And as I multitask, I often tell myself, there's so much literature and studies that tell you that multitasking is not a way to be more productive, right? And, I'm part of the, probably the majority of people who are notoriously, unproductive, thinking that multitasking is making them more productive. And same thing with the agents. You're just adding more and more stuff. You're trying to multitask. And I think they're seeing a diminishing marginal gain early on, and then even a drop in productivity.
Well, I think it's an important distinction too that the article makes, separating burnout, right? That term that we again have been hearing for a long time now, and brain fry, which is obviously kind of a new phenomenon specifically associated with this particular overuse of AI, but burnout measuring that physical and emotional dimension of distress, right? Like actually feeling exhausted from work. And then this brain fry concept, really, like you mentioned, acute mental fatigue. It's like way too much resources being demanded. Your attention is so focused. You're just kind of operating beyond what you have capacity for. And that all of those things is really, it seems like what's going into management of AI agents. And as I was reading this article, that's where I had a feeling of separating my own personal experiences from what clearly others are going through at larger organizations that have progressed to advanced use of AI agents. And I'm using it, like probably many others, more as a advanced chat interface, and feeling again the benefits of getting very prescriptive answers and being able to maybe multitask more efficiently if you can achieve that. So I think that was a real unlock in my mind of understanding that while there's more, maybe for me personally, or in our organization to do when it comes to advancing our own use of AI, there are definitely pitfalls that we need to be mindful of as we enter into, clearly in some cases, I would say dangerous, world when it comes to employee mental wellness around how you can not only manage a team of people but also a team of agents.
Yeah, it's like opening the can that I think of that we discussed, of topics that we discussed before, that like there's productive ways to use AI and there's unproductive ways, and it's hard to tell what that is. But it seems like, at least from this study, that if you're going to replace routine or repetitive tasks, that's a good productive way to use it. It saves you time. It lowers your burnout rate and things like that. And what I find interesting about this concept of the term brain fry is that it is truly distinct from burnout, right? That like where burnout is, as you noted, emotionally driven, the brain fry is really cognitively driven, right? And they're two very separate things. Like you can see a agent improving one and lowering the other, but if you just read the headline, like I did initially, I was like, oh, this is burnout. This is what they're talking about. And you realize it's actually something very different. I think about this all in the context of what we're being sold, right? And when I say what we like as like the broader, human race is being sold, around AI, it's like a promise for everyone who's a white collar worker. There's a promise around AI that, and this is like the optimistic and very positive view of it, is that it's going to give you more time to focus on meaningful work, right? That's the idea. It's going to replace all this stuff, which is kind of this burnout element or routine task. It's just where I think it's becoming, partially because it's a natural transition, but also because like companies are incentivizing AI use versus impact. It's becoming this tool that's not doing that. It's not freeing you up for more meaningful work. It's stressing you out. It's overloading you. And in some cases, if you do it too much, it's actually hurting your productivity. I think there's a quote from one of the survey respondents who was an engineer that I thought just like summed up everything we talked about super well. I figured I'd just read it, let it settle in a little bit, and then maybe we talk about what companies can do to kind of, in light of this information, what they can do to kind of combat this phenomenon. But the quote is, again, from this engineer: I had one tool helping me weigh the technical decisions, another spitting out drafts and summaries, and I kept bouncing between them, double checking every little thing. But instead of moving faster, my brain just started to feel cluttered, not physically tired, just crowded. It was like I had a dozen browser tabs open in my head, all fighting for attention. I caught myself rereading the same stuff, second guessing way more than usual, and getting weirdly impatient. My thinking wasn't broken, just noisy, like mental static. What finally snapped me out of it was realizing that I was working harder to manage the tools than to actually solve the problem.
Wow. That picture of the dozens of browser tabs open really resonated. I think we can all relate to being in Chrome or whatever your web browser is, and just having way too many things going on at once, and that's within a single application and just something you're managing yourself. So that really brought it to life.
Yeah. So in terms of things that managers can do, right? The one thing that the article did talk about, because they try to address like, now you have this insight, what should you do? They have a good stat about workers whose managers take time to answer their questions about AI had 15% lower mental fatigue scores. And so I think that's really important. I think I get the sense that a lot of companies, they're saying, hey, here's an AI tool, here's a cloud account, here's an open AI account or a ChatGPT account, go run with it, go do stuff. But there's not a lot of conversation, right? And we talked a little bit about the loneliness factor as well, where like you're being asked to like interact with this non-human who seems kind of human in a computer, but you're not having social interactions, but you're doing more work. So what replaced going to your colleague's desk and asking for feedback is now being replaced with the AI tool. And like that makes you lonelier. You don't feel like you feel supported. So I think just having generally manager involvement will go a long way. I think it'll go a long way in terms of reducing burnout and mental fatigue, but I think it also goes a long way in just feeling supported from your organization and sharing best practices on how you can use it and things like that.
Yeah, that's a good point. And being really deliberate about the metrics you do set around it. You obviously referenced the example of usage being tied to bonuses, and that's going to drive behavior in a way that may not always be productive or healthy, and it can just get really intense rather than focusing on what matters, which is business impacts. So I know there are a lot of great ways you can track usage within Claude and other tools, but being mindful that usage as a means to an end is not the only thing to focus on, because that's how you get in these again really vicious cycles of intense activity.
Exactly. I would double click on that. I mean, the reality is for centuries, companies have existed and they have metrics, right? If you're a salesperson, you have a bookings quota. If you're like a customer success person, you have retention metrics you're tying to. I think those things remain the same. You still comp on those. You still get bonuses and variable pay based on these kind of core KPIs of your business. I don't see any reason for that to change. I see no reason for a company to say your token usage, right, is going to be a factor in how you get compensated. Your token usage is going to be a factor in if you get promoted. It should be, what do you produce? What type of impact you have? And look, if you could not use AI at all and somehow be the top performing sales agent, good for you. And you should be rewarded accordingly. Likewise, it's probably easier for you if you aren't the top performing sales agent to become the top performing sales agent by using AI tools to speed up your replies, making them more thoughtful to prospective customers and things like that. One of the things I think it's worth kind of maybe sharing or ending on, this is unrelated to the article, by the way, but I thought it was incredibly important. We actually debated, you and I, whether we should be talking about this instead of the BCG study. There's a New York Times article that is pretty short, so I encourage everyone to read it. It's about a single person company that is worth $1.8 billion. It's a little bit deceptive. They have $1.8 billion in revenue, but presumably they're a billion-dollar company. If you guys remember, several years ago, Sam Altman predicted that there would be single-person billion-dollar companies out there. I'm not sure if he predicted it would happen so quickly, but it has. It's this guy who started a telemedicine business. He's really a marketer by trade, but he used the AI agents to create a marketing strategy, deliver on that strategy, build a website, deliver to customer success. He does not have his own product necessarily. What he does have is another company who's out there delivering this telemedicine, GLP-1 drug business, but he runs that front end to build all that revenue and things like that. He just hired his brother, so he's not necessarily by himself. But when they asked him, hey, this business is becoming a very legit business, it's $1 billion business, are you going to hire more people? And his quote was, at this point, I want to hire people because I'm lonely. And I just thought that was really telling about AI and loneliness and burnout and everything. And it's crazy to think that a single person can build a business that quickly and to that scale. So just pretty incredible.
It is pretty incredible, right? And I'm sure, Sam Altman probably didn't have loneliness in mind. Again, when he made that prediction, it was probably all about what's possible through enormous productivity. And who would have thought, $1 billion company and the thought of social connection and loneliness is one of the first things that comes to mind. But I agree, that's kind of a nice place to put a bow on today's pod. So thanks as always for those who are listening. You can tune in on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, and be sure to listen or be sure to subscribe to Wellable Weekly for all of our other insights. Thank you.